of my favorite parks in New York City. It's called the Highline Park. And as I was walking, I saw a very provocative billboard, which you are seeing right now. This is literally plastered in cities throughout the US. Stop hiring humans. So, when I saw that, I thought, wow, how should we think about this? And an anecdote came to mind, and I'm sure it's one that many of you already know, and it's this. In 1997, Garry Kasparov, the world champion of chess at the time, played a match against Deep Blue, an IBM computer. And for the first time, a computer was able to defeat a grandmaster. Obviously, there were news all over the world, like, how could this happen? What does this mean? And for the most part, that's a story that most people know. What most people don't know is what happened afterwards. Kasparov had a very interesting idea. Realizing the power of computers, he thought, why don't we create a new way of playing chess in which you can have humans using computers playing chess against other humans using computers. So started what was eventually known as Centaur chess, or advanced chess. So he created a tournament, and in this tournament, he had a finals match that had, figure this out, 2 amateur players with a home computer playing against 2 grandmasters with a very powerful computer. And you see where this is going. The amateurs with the less powerful computer won, defeated the grandmasters with a more powerful computer. So now Kasparov was even more confused. How could this happen? And he had a very interesting discovery or realization. How did the amateurs that are not as good as the grandmasters, with a computer that was not as good as the grandmasters, win? And he realized that the difference was that the way that the amateurs used the computer and partnered with the computer was much better than the way that the grandmasters were partnering with the computer. So these little icons here, what we're trying to represent is you could have, let's say, a smaller capacity in the human and smaller technology, but with much better processes in terms of how they relate, and they will beat better humans with better technology. So today, what I want to bring to all of you is what we call Kasparov's law, which is essentially how the weak human player plus a machine can beat better players with better machines if you had the right processes. And obviously, this draws parallels to the world of AI. So in today's sessions, we're going to break down just a couple of highlights for technology, processes, and people. And we're going to cap it off with leadership, which is the role of most of the people in this room. Let's start with technology. Now, I'm not going to focus on the, technical aspects of technology. We're not going to be talking about what is the most powerful LLM or what are the different applications. I want to look at it from a business lens. And as you may know, AI right now, the easiest, the path of least resistance, so to speak, in the business environment is to use it as a cost killer. I will decrease my costs. And there's already plenty of examples. If you're interested, just Google this. The over 600 real-world generation AI examples provided by Google. There's lots of lists like this. But there's cases that are interesting. Deutsche Bank was able to take some type of financial reporting that used to take days. Now they do it in a couple of minutes. Microsoft saving $500 million. Unfortunately, most of it is in call centers with replacement. But ultimately, we have evidence that you can cut costs. Now, here's the challenge to business leaders. Because cutting costs and increasing efficiency means you are doing the same thing you were doing before, but cheaper. But it's still the same service. You didn't really innovate, you just made something more efficient. Nothing wrong with that, we'll talk about it later. But you're missing out on a bigger opportunity, which is how do you create revenue with new sources that you were not able to do before? So I'm going to show you a few interesting applications of AI being used for something more than just cost cutting. The first one I really like because it's very creative and it's on something that is not the most exciting of businesses. There is a series of trucks across New York City and many other parts of the US that they're used to help you move your furniture from an office to a house, etc. And these moving trucks created what is now known as the world's smartest billboard. Because as you can see, they have this billboard on the side. It's essentially a sign. But this sign is digital, and it changes depending on which part of the city they're in. So right now, they're going under the famous Brooklyn Bridge, and it has a sign that is talking about Brooklyn. Whereas when they go a little bit more towards Manhattan, they're talking about Broad Street. And it'll make messages about the time, the weather, etc. It's consistently updating, so as the trucks drive around the city, you would like to look at them because they have a sign that's telling you something funny about the area, that is location. So they're getting a very different way of marketing by utilizing Gen AI. Or I don't know if you heard about Puma, which made a generative AI, uniform creator. So essentially requested a lot of people to make your own design for, I think it was Manchester United, and here's some of the designs that people made. Again, you're getting brand engagement with generative AI. And there's many other cases, not my favorite one, but Coca-Cola is apparently making new flavors. There is Booking.com improving the quality of your booking, etc. But my favorite one, by far right now, is using generative AI for the discovery of new drugs, scientific research, new materials. So this is not cost-cutting. This is generating new revenue, and the lens through which I invite you to look at this technology is not which is the best technology. Leave that to the technical folks. You as business leaders, send a challenge to your team. How can we create new value with this technology? And that's a much different strategy. So let's leave it at that for now, for technology, and let's talk a little bit about processes. If you remember what I mentioned a couple minutes ago about Kasparov's law, the main differentiator between the not-so-good player with the not-so-good technology and the other ones that had better elements was the way they use their technology. So if you and your company are afraid that you don't have the talent of a bigger company, or you don't have the access to as much investment in technology as the others, there's one thing that's within your control: use it better. And you may be able to beat the big guys. Now, how do we use it better? There's obviously a lot to say. This is a short presentation. I just want to give you a few pointers. The first one has to do with how do you use an AI? How do you use it yourself? I'm going to play you a short video by Sam Altman. He is the CEO of OpenAI, that company that creates ChatGPT. Please pay attention to the way he describes the utilization of ChatGPT by different generations.
Older people use ChatGPT as a Google replacement. 20s and 30s use it as like a life advisor something, and then like college use it as an operating system. They don't really make life decisions without asking like ChatGPT what they should do. And it has like the full context.
See the range? Utilizing ChatGPT as a Google replacement. Why? Because all we needed about technology earlier was to search for stuff. That's all we knew. So if you're in that camp, if you're just using ChatGPT for searching stuff and asking questions, there's other levels, like he said, 20s and 30-year-olds are using it as advisors, and then the next generation, they're using it as an operating system. What he means by that is that's where everything happens for them, and everything stems from the utilization of Gen AI. I'm not saying that that is the right way of using it. What I'm trying to invite you as leaders, if you want to be a company that with maybe not as much talent and not as much technology beats the big guys, it starts with leaders making better use of it. If you don't know what's possible with Gen AI, you're not in a good position to lead. You're behind, and you have the control of that. So that's the first invitation. Learn how to use it better. And the second one is give some thought to how can your organization use this better. Again, I'll give you just a couple of examples. This first one, it looks like a complicated model, but it's a simple idea and actually a very interesting one. It's called the Jagged Frontier of AI Capabilities, publicized more by Professor Ethan Mollick from Wharton. And as you can see, it has this line, this squiggly line here that goes across a dotted line. So I'll explain this. Previous technologies worked almost in a linear way. For example, if you have a calculator and you do 5 times 5, gives you the right result. So then you say, well, maybe it can do 50 times 50, gives you the right result. So you start using bigger numbers. You see where this is going. You can predict that the calculator will be able to answer your questions. That was the path for most of the technologies we've been using for the last 100 years. But AI is weird. If you remember ChatGPT, the first one that was released, 3.x, you could ask it very complex questions, and it would give you good answers. Did anybody here see the initial screw-ups that the first ChatGPT would do with very simple things? For example, one of the most publicized ones was you would ask it, how many letter R's are in the word strawberry? It was counting letters, and it couldn't do it. Later version of ChatGPT, you would say, please give me an image of a room without any elephants in it. You see where this is going? It would paint a picture with an elephant, and it would say it very proudly, here's your picture without elephants in it. So what is not intuitive about this type of technology is that you see it do it very complex things, and then you see make mistakes. And that's the idea of this jagged frontier. Some things are inside the frontier, and it can do very well. Some other things are outside the frontier and cannot do very well. What does this have to do with your business? You will have to discover what can Gen AI do for you in your industry, in your business today, which, by the way, will change in about 2 weeks. So you have to develop that skill of discovering what are the capabilities of Gen AI if you want to use them correctly in your company. You cannot say, well, we'll do it today, we set a strategy and wait on it for a year. You're already behind. The AI that we had in January 2025 versus what we have right now in September, very different. So keep up with this, and you have to discover it. A second aspect is how do you accelerate this discovery? So obviously, upskill your people, but make a few changes. Just in case you're in the left column, let's try to move to the right. If you're in protection, let's not use AI because it might mess up. Do the previous slide. Remember what it can work for discovery. The second one, go from waiting to experimenting. If you're like waiting to see how this plays out, you're already behind. Start doing experiments, safe ones. And whenever possible, go from pilots to production. Pilots, in many cases, we use them as an excuse to tell ourselves and the world, we are doing something about AI. We're piloting stuff, which means you're not releasing anything to anybody. So pilots are good to learn, but they have an objective. Learning. You set a hypothesis, you set a goal, you set a bar. Once we've cleared it, we need to do something about it. So you're stuck in pilot land, it's time to move on. Obviously, let's do this responsibly. Hence, again, here comes the role of the leader. Let's find out what's possible, let's get our people to do it, and now let's make sure we don't get in deep doo-doo by doing that. So some of the main issues as reported by McKinsey are not surprising. When using generative AI, leaders are worried about inaccuracy because, as you know, sometimes it hallucinates. That's why you check it. There might be cybersecurity issues, intellectual property infringement, and some other things. So you do have to take care of this, but you should not stay away from using it because you're afraid that this may happen. That'll be as bad as saying we cannot have moving trucks in our company because they may crash. Well, make it as safe as possible and get the benefit from it. So, again, just a couple pointers on processes. So we talk about using technology to generate new ways of creating value, using processes first as yourself as leaders, and then enabling the rest of your company. Now let's talk about the people. And yes, we've had instances of AI replacing humans. It doesn't always go well. After IBM fired 8,000 people, they actually hired to rehire them. After Klarna, a fintech, was very famous because the CEO announced to the world, we have such powerful AI agents that we're going to fire 700 people. And he did. And he had to rehire them because what they discovered was that as efficient as the agents may be, the company had to rehire them to restore the empathy it amputated. Listen to this. We're in the Philippines. Empathy. There's a lot of that going around here. We don't want to amputate it like this company did. So this takes us to the synthetic workforces. Now, remember this billboard from earlier? I would really like to see this billboard to go from this to this. Let's go from stop hiring humans to hire AI teammates. I think it's a much better approach to this. However, before we hire AI teammates, there's one more thing we need to do. I'm going to play you a video from one of the leaders in Y Combinator, which makes a very good description of one step that we need to do.
People to think of is not only should you think about how do I automate my existing workflows today as in whatever role I have, but also if I could reinvent how my role is done from first principles today, how would I do it? How would my job be done? And think in that way. That's where new companies will get built, is where people are fundamentally rethinking how things can get done, as opposed to just saying, okay, well, my job is 10 tasks and I can go automate 3 of them.
You get that? Look at the difference. Instead of saying, here's my job, I'm going to automate 3 things that I'm doing, what she's asking you to do is, actually, let me be a little bit more extreme. Imagine you're starting your company today in 2025. With what you know today, would you create the same roles with the same responsibilities that you have today? You have some sense of what's available with technology, probably you wouldn't. That's why she's inviting us to reimagine the role. And I would offer that this would be the first step in having a synthetic workforce. Don't just leave things as they are and start adding agents or copilots. Rethink, what should this role be? Is this role to pick up the phone and route calls? Or is this role to delight a customer? Those are very different things. And when you reframe the role, you have better opportunities. So what is a synthetic workforce? Actually, it's not a static definition. I would disagree with anybody that offers one. I think there's a progression here. And it starts with humans that start using copilots. It then evolves into humans that collaborate with the help of copilots. It further then evolves when you have humans that are using their AIs and copilots, and they're collaborating with each other, the humans and the copilots themselves. And I think the culmination is when you have the synthetic teams that have humans with their copilots collaborating with other humans with their copilots, maybe with some other humans that are a little bit lagging and don't have their AIs, and they have some teammates that are AIs. It's different to delegate tasks to an AI. You ask it to do things and they bring it to you, versus having a teammate that has initiative. So that's a synthetic workforce. There's challenges in managing those. We don't have time to discuss today, but just think about this progression and what you can unlock with it. Now, you can get better results by doing this. This is predictable from Kasparov's law. And there's different versions of these teams. So let's just consider one thing, because there are versions of these teams that are not what you want, like Amazon supervising workers and firing them, or something that I learned when I got here in the Philippines, that I know there is a lot of work around the call centers. But I read an anecdote that I'd like to share with you. There was a Filipino worker at a call center, and it said, I have an AI co-pilot. Gives me responses to everything I need. And it also measures my performance. If I stumble, if I say a word, I lose a point. If I speak for longer than 5 or 7 minutes, I lose a point. And then last loss of points can get me fired. And then he said, it's like we've become robots. So if you're going to build a synthetic workforce, ask yourself the question, we're in the Philippines. What is characteristic from here? I can tell you, I've been here for 2 days, and I already feel like I'm swimming in a sea of hospitality, welcoming, empathy, that I even had to ask some of my people here, how do you call that? Because it's part of your culture. And here's some terms that we got. This is a competitive advantage. Not everyone else like this. Go to New York, people don't even look at you in the eye, and they're just trying to avoid you. They're too busy. Here, everybody looks at you, trying to say hello. It's very different. So, would you rather have efficiency in your business and amputate this, like the other companies did? Because I know it might be the best way to go. So I do invite you to use AIs, but remember this question. Do you want the humans to be the pilots and the AIs to be the co-pilots, or the other way around? Let's invest in our people, which is at the base of success. Finally, the role of leaders. Look, leaders have a disproportionate impact on an organization's results. There's research that's already showing that there's an issue with leaders. For example, at McKinsey, leaders are not steering fast enough. That's an observation. Also by McKinsey, apparently leaders think that the main limiting factor is that the people don't know how to use AI, whereas the actual issue is they don't know how to create the alignment inside of their organization. So there's a mismatch. And this mismatch could come when your organization looks like this. There's a leader that doesn't really understand AI, but is setting the direction. It's asking their help from a legal department that doesn't know about AI. They're putting the rules. They're getting the support from an IT department that might be entirely up to date. You may say an unempowered chief AI officer can't make any decision, but you have that in your team. You have managers resisting, and then you have employees doing whatever they want. This is not a recipe for success, and this is not a technology problem. This is actually a leadership problem. Let me offer you a couple more ideas. Let's take the hype down. As much as I've talked about the importance of AI, the same people leading AI are saying, okay, this might be a little bit of a bubble, so it's helpful, but let's not get our hopes up. And there are already a lot of news around how AI is not delivering the results. So there's a little bit of a framework. I'm just going to skip it today because it might be a little bit too much. But I want to leave you with this idea from Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft himself, saying it's not only about technology, it's about doing the hard work of culturally changing how we work. Again, the idea of people, how do we use technology? So today, we've talked about people, processes, technology, and leaders. I invite you to learn more about AI. Try new models, try new applications, experiment with it, share what you've been learning with others, learn from others. But more importantly, here is the final question that I would like to leave you all with. At the beginning, we talked about Kasparov, when he realized that technology had beat him, and his response was to create centaur chess. This is your moment to ask yourselves the question, what will be a Filipino-centric, human-centric answer to creating a synthetic workforce? And that answer is yours to give. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oseas Ramirez Assad. Once again, we would like to remind everyone that if you have questions for our speaker, you may approach the nearest microphone or kindly scan the QR code that you see on screen. To enrich the discussion further and to lead the Q&A...
If I could get the production team to show my computer for a second. Let's see what happened with them.
He had some teammates. I don't know, how many do you have?
3, I had a little competition, so we can bring my computer in line again. Oh, actually worked and worked and worked. All right. So what happened was I thought, well, why don't I create a website about the conference and my presentation while I'm presenting? So I had 3 eyes do that. Let's see what came in terms of the results. So let's see what do we have from Claude. So Claude created this for us. And, you know, it includes information about the keynote, Kasparov's law, synthetic workforce. All of this was created. I just fed it a couple of pieces of information in a prompt, and I already have a working website. Now, this is created by Claude. Let's see if we like the other one better. This is Gemini. So I have another website. So I actually have websites to choose from. Similar model, doing some bits and pieces about the content, about our company, about myself as a presenter. And let's see if B0, which is the third one, oh, see, there's also another one. Different color palette. So these were my coworkers. They did all of this as I was presenting. It took them around 5 minutes. All I needed to do was enter some text, give them the files. So this is part of my work. Oh, and by the way, I have another guy here that was capturing all the audio. It will further transcribe and give me a summary. So why not?
Okay, very good. Let's give him a big hand and his teammates. That's wonderful. So I think I'm going to have a very easy time of it because I think I see a lot of people here eager to ask you questions. But in the meantime, before we see people lining up at the microphone, if I may relate it to the earlier sessions. You know, we had a session number 2. I think it was about trust and integrity. So, well, where you're talking about 2 types of workforce, the synthetic one and the authentic one. So, how do you build an organizational trust when integrating those 2, synthetic and authentic workforce? I mean, this is a leadership conference, right?
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that the CEOs in front of you are thinking about.
Wow, that's a difficult one because I'm also in the seat of CEO, and I know the type of dilemmas that we face. It's hard to build trust, and I'm going to go to the most extreme of cases, when you kind of have to ask people to, well, dig their own grave or dig the graves of their teammates. Like, learn to use AI so that we can fire the people around you. That does not entirely help build trust. So, at the same time, you should not lie and saying, well, everybody's going to keep their job, if that is not actually a possibility. So that is quite a conundrum. I would say, let's start with the basics. First, don't lie. Second, I think we should do the best effort we can to upskill our people. Again, let's rethink the role. The role is not to pick up the phone. If AI can do it better or cheaper, have AI do it better or cheaper. But what can you do with the talent people you have if you give them better tools? What type of services can you provide that you were not able to provide before? That is a leadership responsibility, but you don't have to figure everything out. So in order to build trust, I would much rather say, guys, here's the situation. We have competitive pressures to cut costs. That could be done by firing some of you. We don't want to do it, but we may have no option. Here are some tools for you to learn, and we're going to make maybe an internal competition which we invite them to discover new ways of delivering value to customers. That way, you're sharing the responsibility with the team. That would be an example of a few that maybe we would follow to build trust.
Wow. Okay, very good, very practical, very real. All right. You know, before you came on, there were some QR codes here because I think the conference is using automated question and answer. So if there are questions that I think would be flashed here, or you would want to reverse the process and you ask questions of the audience and challenge them.
All right,
What
so
do you think?
you can send questions to me, but I have questions for you. So who goes first? If you guys don't move, I'm going to go. All right, you're too slow. So can I use my screen again? I want to ask you 5 questions. We're going to do this with a Mentimeter. And in the meantime, think about if you have any questions, okay? So because this is something that I'm actually curious about. So you'll see on the screen, there's a Mentimeter. You can either go to menti.com and enter the code, or you can use the QR code here. It's going to be 5 questions. Check out, bring out those phones. I'm not seeing you all with your phones. Actually, I want your responses. I'm interested, so take them out. Break out of the sleepiness from lunch, and let's see those responses. Because what's interesting here, figure out what we're doing. We have a group of leaders, of select leaders from different industries. It's interesting to get your insights of what is going on with this type of questions. So, by the way, they're anonymous, so please answer truthfully. You're confident that you yourselves, or the leader in your organizations, actually know enough about AI to make the right decisions. Okay, so interesting distribution. We're at around, okay, we're getting 60 responses. So I think this is starting to get like a good representative sample. If you haven't picked up your phone yet, do it now because I'm going into the next slide. I don't know if the QR code will still be there, okay? Question number 2. In my organization, leaders encourage experimenting with AI by, this is a multiple choice one, but choose the ones that are appropriate, if any. All right. So apparently, explicitly giving permission to test and learn is the leading one. And then in second place, we're having providing resources, times, tools, budget for experimentation. Okay, that's good to see. Third one, this is personal. I use AI mainly to choose your top 3. Again, be truthful. Let's see what's happening. And remember, think about questions you may have for me. You were a little bit slow, so I'm waiting for those once I sit down again. All right, search for information, number 1, not surprising. Text generation, again, not surprising. Those are very good things. But as you can see, as we go down the right where there's more complexity, there's not that much activity, like designing your own GPTs to do work for you. By the way, anyone in this room can do it because it's just adding a plus sign and giving some instructions, and then you have somebody that works for you. So if you have any questions, get some reverse mentoring on how to create your own GPTs. Next one, my organization's approach to generative AI is best described as it's not a priority, or we're just doing pilots. All right, let's see where we get in the aggregation. Early stage employees using it formally for internal training only. That seems to be the vast majority for now. Last question, and I hope you're ready to ask questions now in reverse. The outcomes of Gen AI adoption so far in my organization are not much. Cost decreases through automation or workforce reduction. Have you actually created new products and services? And or you have had negative business impacts. Remember, you can choose a few here. So this is very revealing. As of now, from the people in this room, the main outcome of Gen AI adoption in your organization is not much. Employees are using it on their own. That's a missed opportunity. And remember, attitude reflects leadership. So let's see what you can do about that. Let's go back to see if we have any questions from you. Thank you.
All right. So that was a very participative audience. How does this audience compare, and the answers they gave, to some of the other audiences you've handled before? Is this typical or atypical?
I'd say it depends on the industry. I've seen some cases in which the path that companies are following is they start building all their tools internally. And that makes sense at some degree, because if you build your tools, you can connect all your data. For example, HR, which admittedly is not the most innovative of all functions, are doing very interesting things because now they can connect their separate systems, like have performance management, and this then tells the learning management system what to recommend in terms of learning. So that type of connection, when you do your tools internally, is very powerful. However, what we're discovering is that most of the tools that are built internally underperform the tools that are available commercially. So you're getting not as good tools, but you're getting the value of data integration. So that's one thing that we're observing. And the other one that I find very interesting is, it seems like large organizations don't know how to buy AI. We've actually been asked by multinationals, tens of thousands of people, telling us, I don't even know how to do an RFP for AI, so give us your presentation and we'll ask other vendors and then we'll formulate some form of Gen AI RFP, and then we'll start buying. There's no reference of prices, SLAs. So we're seeing an interesting scenario in which the entire industry is, I guess, a little bit heterogeneous.
Right, okay. So, but being leaders here, what would be that one capability that, maybe not one, but several capabilities that they should have, the fundamentals, so that they can be AI ready, or at least open to AI?
Learn how to learn quickly. Remember, this is the fastest moving technology. No invention in the history of humanity had reached 100 millions of users as fast as ChatGPT. So this is moving very fast. No other technology has like an incrementally more powerful model every like 6 months, every 3 months, et cetera. So if you thought in the previous era of digitization, like, oh, we need to learn fast because everybody was telling us that, we need to innovate faster, well, it just got faster. So if you don't yet have a good capability of learning and doing something with that learning quickly, you're in trouble.
Okay, all right. Let's open up the questions to the audience. Is there anybody in the audience interested in asking questions?
There's one over there. Excellent.
Oh, there. Okay. All right. Low success. Sorry, it's hard to read. Can you make it a little bigger? All right.
Yeah, great.
Low success rate. AI seems ripe for disappointment. What specific leadership interventions are needed to improve chances of success?
Love it. Remember when I told you at the end of the presentation, let's take the hype down a notch? As much as I suggest that we learn, part of the learning is, remember the jagged frontier? What does this thing actually do? How does this thing actually work? If you're not familiar with this, I highly recommend for you to look for a framework published by Gartner called the hype cycle. It's very interesting because they've had this model for years and they apply it to every technology. And the gist of it is this. We create a new technology and then people start noticing and then we start saying, oh, this is awesome. Oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. And then results don't come and then we're like, well, maybe what's going on? And then it reached a point of disillusionment, like, oh, this was all a fad. And then it kind of starts picking back up and then you get to a good level of productivity. It doesn't sound familiar. Who remembers the craze about blockchain and cryptocurrency from a few years ago? Yep. It's going to change everything. And yes, there are cryptocurrencies, but not everything changed. Before that, there was IoT, so it keeps on going. AI will follow a similar path. So don't get discouraged by the fact that it's not all the crazy things we expected it to be, but do the hard job of finding what can this do for our company today. And remember, it'll change in 3 months. You have low success rates today. Change your methodology, change the processes that connects the human with the technology, and wait out a little bit, the technology is maturing.
Yeah, it's either they get discouraged after a while or they become very dependent to it, which brings us to another question that says, what are the specific ways companies can efficiently avoid AI dependency, but rather utilize it efficiently as a tool for their employees to adapt? You either love it or you hate it. Or it just fades into oblivion?
Well, let's think through that. So what are the specific ways companies can efficiently avoid AI dependency? Look, I'm going to use a parallel. If we were 15 years ago, maybe this question would have been, what are the specific ways a company can effectively avoid internet dependency? 15 years later, we depend on the internet. It's not been that bad. But we learn how to use it in certain ways, and we keep on evolving. So to me, that sounds like a little bit more of a philosophical fear, like AI dependency. Look, if it's doing the right job the right way, and you have access to it, what's the problem? It's freeing you up to do higher level things. What we don't want is something that somebody asked earlier today. We don't want to use it as a replacement for our thinking. We don't want to outsource our brains to AI. We already are getting some of the initial studies that people that are using AI to not do the hard work of thinking are starting to little by little lose their cognitive capabilities. So as long as dependency does not mean I'm not using my brain, if it's doing work that is good to delegate to it, and it frees you up to do higher level tasks, please, by all means.
Yeah, and I like your pilot, co-pilot example earlier. You have to be the pilot, not the co-pilot, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Yes.
Question from the floor?
All right, from over there.
Hello. Hi, I'm George Su from Taiwan. I'm the CEO of Sustainable Prosperity Corporation. I've been in the country for 14 years. So my question to you is, based on your 2 days experience in the Philippines, apart from those chatbots in customer service or building the website, are there real use cases that a company around the world utilize AI to improve their productivity? Is there any real life cases you can share with all of us? Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to give you an anecdotal one, which just because it's very illustrative. But remember, just Google's report on the 600 cases, utilization cases of generative AI. They have examples across all industries of different sorts. So instead of trying to recite the 600, just Google that document. But I'll give you a very interesting example. We have a client that is a media production company. And we were talking to the owner. This is a very large company. They make movies, Netflix productions, HBO Max, you name it. And the problem that they have is apparently the industry of producing media is not the most effective one in the world. The examples they were giving to me, I could not believe. There were examples such as, it's commonplace to show up to the day of production with the entire crew and actors, and the people in the production room get there, and they don't even agree on which version of the script they're going to follow, because everybody had their photocopies scribbled. It's to that level of bad. He gives us an example of like, oh, we traveled 100 kilometers to a shooting site because the scene was, crowning the king, and the guy from the props forgot the crown. So now you have the entire, so anyway, lots and lots and lots of examples of inefficiency. So this guy created a series of agents that review all the production process and are proactively warning the people in the system, like, look, if you're gonna be shooting this scene, you need this. If you're gonna be doing this, you need to place that work order. This is the latest version of the script, etc. They already have a few dozen agents, and it's already saving them a few $1 million when it comes to production. I'm sharing that example because it's closer to us. We're working with them. Then there's the other 600 from Google. And if you keep on digging, Microsoft has its own. So there's more than enough to go around. The important thing is which ones may work for you in your industry.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? No one? Okay. So let's look at the other questions. I know that there were a lot. Okay. Human AI collaboration workflow is, it's also George Su who asked that. Is there a best practice framework or phases/process for embedding AI in business? Is there?
Look, right now, so if you allow me to be a little bit cynical just for a second.
Sure.
So at least 1 year ago, the running joke was that the only people making money from AI were consulting companies. Let me tell you how to do this thing we've never done before. So, cynicism aside, if you literally Google AI implementation frameworks, Gartner, Accenture, PwC, like everybody has their own view of it because your IP is creating frameworks. So I would recommend you to look for those to see which one is more useful for your industry. From my perspective, I guess I come from the innovation realm. The more interesting thing for me is how do you enable people at the edges of the organization to find those use cases and you have a dual movement. So this is not a framework, this is a flow, and I finally, I think this is more important. You can do top down and bottoms up, but you need both. So to me, a simple framework would be state your business objectives. You're the business leaders. And then push it down into your team. How can we use AI to better achieve these business objectives? But also get it from the bottom. The people that are in the front line, give them the tools. Listen to them, what is possible with AI, and then reframe those business objectives. Once you know what is possible, you can update the way you're framing the objectives, and then use any framework for the maturity in the middle. But to me, that's the main flow that we should be looking at.
All right. So I hope that explains it. Yeah, it looks like people are satisfied with that answer. There is one last question, I believe. AI has no regulation right now, and the pilot-co-pilot concept is not yet clear. There is a danger of dependency that lessens the use of human brain. Safeguards, are there?
It's actually, there's more than one question there. So let's just start with the regulation right now. The European Union is already starting to create some regulation, and usually what happens, they lead the way in regulation, and then many countries follow suit with whatever version. For example, one of the things that we're experiencing is we're getting ready for when the new regulation is enacted that AIs should not be utilized to measure or assess in any way the emotional state of a person inside of a company. There's AIs that, for example, they could monitor your face during a Zoom call or WebEx call and saying like, this person's not paying attention, this person's looking at their phone, which by the way, I've seen some of you do. I don't need an AI for that. But you see my point. We could have an AI checking all of you. That's not desirable. There's already some regulation for that. So it's not entirely accurate that there's no regulation. It's just being enacted progressively. And then in the US, for example, the tech companies are trying to get cozy with Trump so that he doesn't put regulations and they can keep on doing this. And then China never regulates anything. So there's a little bit of everything depending on where you go. Now, in terms of the dependency, this is what we mentioned earlier. Do not outsource the thinking to AI. I'll give you an example, something that I do in my role as CEO. I do the thinking. I set up the strategy. I take it to the limit of my capabilities. I ask my team. I integrate it. And once I'm sure this is as far as I can take it, then I go to AI, but I don't ask it the question, give me the strategy for my company. I ask it a very pointed question. It's very detailed. Sometimes my questions are 2 pages long. And I'm instructing it. Look at the strategy. I have questions here. I think there are gaps here. And then I don't tell it to give me a strategy. I tell it, offer me a critique of the strategy. And if you want to get even more sophisticated, one thing that I've done is I've said to the AI, because you can role play, I said, you are the CEO of a multinational company that helps, I don't know, international companies would go to market. Your team is composed of people that look at the geopolitical implications, I don't know, the marketing aspects, And then I ask it the question saying, get me the response through all of your experts of the critique. So you know how to ask the good questions. After you did the work of thinking, you get a response, then challenge it, do a little bit more, and you didn't outsource your brain. You just found a good brainstorming partner, and at the end, I make the call. Because AI is my co-pilot, I'm the pilot, I'm running the show.
Okay, all right. I have one last question before we end this.
Last question also here from
is
this
there a
side.
question over there?
Left side, your left side here.
Over there.
Okay, there.
Anyway, thank you so much for the presentation, and I can really relate earlier to the ones you mentioned about AI alignment for brands and companies here in the Philippines or maybe outside of the country. So my question would be, so we are trying to do a startup in terms of like doing AI alignment for brands and companies, maybe here in the Philippines or maybe outside, and we are really trying to reflect on the like how we are going to approach the market. Because right now, it is like a very complicated technology for a lot of companies. And as we all know, like it's kind of like a fact, like it's more advanced in terms of adoption and acceptance coming from maybe first world countries. And that's why BPO is really meant to be built here in the Philippines, but served internationally, like for first world countries, and not really meant for the Philippines. And I don't want to like, so my question would be, if there's an AI alignment team here in the Philippines that basically makes AI more human, more aligned, more in tune with brand culture and values, do you think the market is more
meant to be for outside of the country? Built here, serve here, lower cost destination for the world, build engineers here, prompt engineers, prompt developers, but served it outside of the country? Or do you think Philippines is already ready to have that kind of adoption internally here in the Philippines?
All right, that's a multi-layered question, but if I got it correctly, let me offer a couple of things that could be helpful. As the large language models proliferate, one of the things we're seeing is they're getting larger, they're getting smaller, they're getting more efficient for specific use cases. And recently I saw that they're starting to get regional. For example, I think Chile is leading the charge of a multi-country coalition to build a LATAM-specific LLM. So what does a large language model look like if it's trained by people from Latin America with data from there? And would the answers, would its way of operating be more conducive to be consistent with a region? So that will probably become a trend, and you could have like your own Philippines LLM, and it'll be more compatible with your values. Now, that is a heavier lift. That's a harder task. The other thing I can tell you you can do is, if you go past prompting, because prompting is level 1. Prompting is ask questions in a better way. If you go past prompting, look up, maybe you're already doing this, so apologies if that is the case. Look up context engineering and look more complex workflows, agentic workflows. So you can get a query and you pass it to an AI and say, do this with this lens. And then you pass the result to another AI and check what the other guy did. Now you pass it to the next AI and say, your job is, you only focus on Philippine cultural values, make sure that this is aligned. So you have different AIs doing different things with your query, and you can have AIs that specialize only on that. Then you can instruct this AI, this is your job, you give it, maybe you have good files on what the values are, etc. So this combination of AIs allow them each to do specific tasks instead of one trying to do everything. We've done that with very tough problems with coaching. We have one of our products is AI coaches, and it has to actually align with our methodology, with our values before we release it to clients. And it's been solved through that. It's not solved through a prompt. It's not solved through an LLM. It's solved through a multi-model. You use a lot of LLMs. And the concatenation of different prompts and contexts and agents.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So there are 2 more questions on the screen. Do we have time? We have. Okay. You've answered this in your presentation a little bit, but I think they need some emphasis. With business pressure to cut spending and at the same time invest in AI tools and upskilling, how would one balance AI integration and not resort to labor cuts?
Well, first thing, the obvious. It's pretty darn hard. Let's just start there. But let me offer a couple of things. First of all, we need to distinguish when there is a problem that has a solution and when there is a polarity. A problem with that solution is, how much is 5 times 5? And it has one solution. That's it. When you're dealing with a question like this, there's not one answer. And the role of a leader is much more complex because you have the polarity. The polarity could be, keeping people, developing new products, or cost cutting. And the answer is not balancing. Usually when you balance, you get bad parts of both sides. So balancing is not good because you're trying to solve for the polarity. You don't solve it by saying, well, it's 50% this, 50% this, that's the solution. That's not a solution. That is, I stop thinking because it's too hard. Managing the polarity means what it implies. You're going to have to manage, which means, for example, maybe early on, when you're facing the pressure, you might choose to eat less profit during 2 quarters as you ramp up your people so that you can start developing new products. And these new products might not deliver the same results that you lost in the first quarter or the first half of the year, but they may come into the next one. So you're playing a long game instead of a quarterly game. That is an example of you didn't choose one, you didn't choose the other, you're not balancing them, you're managing the tension. As you evolve, once you're 1 year in with this, technology will allow you to do different things. Now, if the business pressure is such that without cost cutting, your business will die, you will have to make some tough decisions. Will we let the business die? Will we take some financing to bridge us into the next area? And hopefully, the government gets involved in supporting some companies as they go through this transition, because it's not going to be easy.
Right. Yeah, and hopefully, fortunately, I think the government is looking at that because there's a national plan for AI upskilling that is in tandem with the national plan for education and workforce development. So we'll hear more about that. in the coming days. So last question, I think, would be, you know that we're in the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, 10 countries, including the Philippines, +1 in 2029 with Timor-Leste. How does AI factor in the local culture diversity in validating a strategy that's expected to address a common regional situation or solution?
Well, AI doesn't do it. That's your job. And the way that I would think about it is, how can you capture those aspects that are specific to the local culture? I give you a few pointers. There's, for example, Hofstede's model. Hofstede spent a lot of time looking at different characteristics from culture. I'll give you one. It has many angles. One is power distance. If you come from a place like Mexico, maybe the Philippines as well, there's a lot of power distance. The boss is Señor Don, like it's a big thing to be a boss. If you're in Australia, like, they will tell you straight up, doesn't matter, you're the boss. The distance is less. That's the difference between one culture and the other. So that's one of the many angles that Hofstede used. You have Hall's model. You have many models that you could feed into the AI and say, look at what we're trying to do through the lens of what makes us different in the Philippines. If you have documents, if you have references, you have videos saying this is the essence of our culture, organize those. Provide those as context, not just prompts. Learn what RAG is, Retributed Augmented Generation. And if this doesn't sound familiar, just ask your tech guy. You can put a lot of stuff into the AI and tell it, here's what I want you to do, here's the information. So it's not AI's job, it's your job to tell it what you want it to do, and it'll get much better.
Okay, I think that's it. You know what? Thank you very much for showing us that this opportunity for cultural and, shall we say, psychological change in merging the synthetic and, what do you call it? Authentic, workforce. So with that, let us give him a big hand. Señor Oseas Ramirez Assad.
Gracias. Encantado.